Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Black Book Stacks. I'm your host, Hoshonda Sanders. My equipment is doing a weird Mercury retrograde type situation. So bear with me while I figure out what exactly that is and if it plans to keep recording me while I am talking. Thank you for your patience. Today is officially the last day of 2024. I had hoped to get this video to you way before now, but life is happening and it's happening fast. So big life changes are afoot, and it kept me from getting right here where I'm at, where I want to be, talking to you about my favorite books of the year. So I will not hold you back any further, except to say that um, I have some physical copies, less than half, I think, of physical copies. Oh, actually, that's not true. I think I have half physical copies and then mostly digital reviews. I won't cover these in order, except I'll start probably with my favorite book of 2024, which is We Refuse by Kelly Carter Jackson. This beautiful cover was made by Taha Clayton. And I started reading this after the election because I needed to pick up something that was thoughtful about history and inclusive, that was not necessarily tied to presidential politics, and something that I felt was nuanced. And what I loved probably the most is that Kelly Carter Jackson talks about refusal in 5 different dimensions. She talks about revolution, protection, force, flight, and joy. I think one of the reasons why I didn't see this book, unfortunately, on many more end of year lists is because of the incendiary cover, right, of a Black woman in dreads with a shotgun. So it'll be interesting to see how the paperback is treated. But I think more than that, the legacy of white supremacy in this country means that there's just a lack of reckoning with the ways that citizenship and patriotism are tied up in gun ownership. The fact that white violence has always been seen as a form of patriotism, but Black violence has been seen as antithetical to American values, even though you look at the American Revolution, you look at the Civil War, and even up to present day battles, there's so much rhetoric and attention that's paid to white male violence in particular, that when you cast it on Black people who are using violence or guns for protection, for self-defense, it just sort of falls apart because of all of the paradoxes that I think are inherent in that discussion. And so I loved the rigor with which Kelly Carter Jackson and the clarity that she used to not only talk about refusal and protection as a response to violence, um, and to white supremacy, but also to talk about joy as a response and as a remedy. She doesn't talk about cures, which I also found really valuable and useful. She talks more about what the remedies are, because a remedy is something that can meet the moment as opposed to something that you think will eradicate um, your problems. And so I love thinking about flight and the Great Migration as a refusal to stay in places where dehumanization of Black families led to lynching and terror during the Reconstruction era and beyond. And there's just so much that I loved about We Refuse. And so I bought 2 copies for 2 of my smartest friends who I thought would really appreciate it. And I just highly recommend it if any of that sounds like it will resonate with you. I also really enjoyed mostly nonfiction this year, actually, was upon reflection. And my second favorite book of the year was There's Always This Year by Hanif Abdurraqib. And I'm not really a basketball fan. I'm not a good basketball player. I did try. I've told this story many times in my life that I thought that there might be a future for me playing basketball as a black girl from the Bronx in the 90s who was obsessed with the Knicks. And just because I was tall did not mean that I was coordinated, which became abundantly clear during my freshman year tryouts. And so I abandoned the Knicks somewhere around 1996. I don't remember when they started flailing about, but it was probably around then. And listen, if you're a basketball fan and you're a New Yorker and it's your jam, like, we don't have to be friends. But this is just my humble opinion. I got tired of being disappointed, so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna find another hobby. And so writing and poetry became my thing. Thus, the writer that you know now was born. But what I appreciate about There Was Always This Year is Honey's like really beautiful poetic style as applied to how we think about sports and ownership and fandom and Ohio and like what it means to a place when a personality or a celebrity becomes the main focal point for the identity of that place. Who else benefits and who mostly doesn't benefit from the fame of someone like a LeBron James? And who are all the other products of that place that could stand that kind of attention or deserve it? Even, I don't think deserve is even a word that shows up in the text, but yeah, it's just a meditation with a basketball theme that also celebrates Black masculinity, Black manhood, and stuff about like LeBron's haircut and Charles Barkley making his little comments about his hairline and the barbershop and these places of Black male intimacy that I don't ever really think about or have any interaction with were pretty fascinating to read about. So that was really, really cool. I also read pretty early on in 2024 Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum by Antonia Hilton. And there's a history of mental health issues in my family, and so I was curious about it from the beginning. This particular book looks at a segregated facility, I believe in Maryland, and it's it was like the mental hospital for the Negro insane. And it was called Crownsville Hospital, and it was basically around for about 100 years, 93 years. A couple of fascinating things about the book to me were that Pauli Murray, legendary legal scholar, theologian, fascinating figure. Pauli Murray's father apparently was admitted there and like never left. I think died from head injuries that he sustained while he was there. So I thought that was fascinating. The other piece here that really stayed with me was this idea of drapetomania, which was the condition of insanity that was ascribed to slaves who wanted to escape slavery, like wanted to be free, and so they were considered like mentally inept, and they had this condition called drapetomania because of their desire to be free instead of to be slaves. Which, what is that even about? But Antonia Hilton connects it also to this idea of the school of thought that Black revolutionaries or Black people who refused to accept dehumanization or the many humiliations of white supremacy, the inferiority complex that Black people are supposed to have, for example, about being Black in America, that those people also had a kind of mental illness, and so that they could easily be tucked away in a place like Crownsville because of their activities to resist being dehumanized, which I thought was pretty fascinating. All right. So, separately, another book that I really loved was Another Word for Love by Carvel Wallace. I got a digital ARC for that one, although I did see the printed cover somewhere and it looked really amazing. And I loved Another Word for Love much in the same for the same reasons, in the same way that I loved There's Always This Year. A Black man talking about his relationship to relationships and to intimacy, and excuse me, really delving into all the complex reasons for commitment issues and the complexity of Black male identity as it relates to relationships and love, and all the different manifestations of love in one's life and relationships. Excuse me. And so that was just nice to read. It was an easy read and it felt fresh. So that's why I also enjoyed that. Speaking of fresh, you heard me talk about Legacy by Dr. Uchi Blackstock. This was one of my favorites of the year. I did talk a little bit about it in my earlier review. Excuse me. And sorry, I keep coughing. I'm having some like respiratory something while I'm trying to talk. But Legacy was really a good one for the year for me, because it was just a helpful reminder of how messed up our healthcare system is, the racist dimensions of it, the fact that those things have been true about racism in our healthcare system for a long time. And while there aren't really remedies that are listed that feel as actionable as they do in, say, We Refuse or maybe other books, I actually appreciated that Dr. Blackstock didn't try to say, here's how we can fix it, or here's what we can do, and sort of talked about what she's doing, what her sister's doing, what other actors in the system or outside of it are doing to improve it. And so that felt to me like a little bit more genuine, you know. Okay, so I have a physical copy, or I had a physical copy of Color Television by Danzy Senna. However, my sister took it. No, I gave it to her. I am trying to get over my hoarding of books and not really succeeding, but whenever I can let go of a book and share it with someone that I love, it's usually my sister. And when she came to visit, I pressed it into her hands and told her that it would be a fun read, which I hope that she agrees with. So, yeah, I see that Color Television got, I think, a lot of praise for being a fun breeze of a ride of of a novel, which I agree with. I love that it was a novelist, a multiracial novelist, or, a mixed race novelist struggling with her work in progress who decides to take a dip into the television making world of Hollywood, with mixed results as well. So that was probably one of the most fun works of fiction that I read this year. Um, I also want to mention Neighbors and Other Stories by Diane Oliver, whose story is so tragic. For those of you who don't know, she started graduate work at the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop, which is very prestigious, has always been so. And she died, unfortunately, in a motorcycle accident in 1966. So her work is just starting to get, I think, the attention and recognition it deserves. But I was genuinely just riveted by the stories in this collection, by her quiet voice. There's sort of this serene discipline in the work. There's this one story about a family that basically lives deep in the woods, and it's haunting, and it'll stay with you. If you read the collection, you'll know which one I'm talking about, but I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, I think that fiction is tricky in that, especially short stories are tricky because there's a tendency to want to over describe and overshare all the different pieces of what you want readers to take away from a scene or what you want them to take away from an interaction, and you only have 10, 12, maybe 15 pages to get there. And so it really takes a particular skill and insight, I think, into humanity, how people talk, what they decide to focus on, what they decide to talk about, to really get there. And so I was really struck by her maturity in the stories. I didn't like all of them as much as I like this one story, um, but I could see the promise in them, which made it really sad to think about how young she was when she left, and what more she could have offered us if she had managed to live a little bit longer. I also mentioned, I think, in my last video that The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates was on my list of my favorites for 2024. I think that's not surprising. I think it made a lot of best of lists for the year, in spite of the dust ups, plural, I guess, that it caused. Yeah, I won't say too much more about The Message, but I did think that the reception that it got said a lot about sort of the status of our ability to have rigorous discourse about international affairs, which is that we don't really have the capacity, I think, anymore, if we ever did, in this country, to really allow for complex debate, particularly when it comes to Israel and Palestine, but really when you're talking about anything that confronts old ideas, entrenched ideas about what our identity is as Americans and what we owe others as a result. I also really enjoyed The White Bonus, 5 Families and the Cash Value of Racism in America by Tracy McMillan. It was a little bit difficult to get through at times. I think that the challenge that Tracy had is is a common one for journalists who blend sort of personal anecdotes with reporting and data on the black white wealth gap and all of its different um, machinations, I guess is one way to put that. And but focusing on her family and four other families and the facts that the fact that they never really talked about the privileges and the bonuses that they had, the advantages that they had because of being white versus the disadvantages that come with being black was really a new way of thinking about how we talk about race and privilege in this country to me. I'm used to people talking about the disadvantages of black people as being some sort of, it's like when people talk about food deserts. Well, they're not really food deserts. Someone else pointed this out. This is not me making this up, by the way. You can do your own research to find out who originally came up with this idea of like food apartheid, right? Food apartheid is like an intentional systemic design of features in society that make it possible for there to be an absence of fruits and vegetables that are affordable in your zip code, right? But a food desert makes it sound like it's just this naturally occurring thing that just happened to happen to you and your neighbors. And so when people talk about the black white wealth gap in America, they always sort of make it seem like, well, of course, black people are poor because look how they act, look where they live, right? But it's never like, oh, well, of course, after World War II, if you give GI benefits to white veterans and you essentially block those same benefits for housing, for education, and other benefits from 1.2 million black veterans, then of course there's going to be a differentiation, maybe not right at that moment, but certainly generationally, there's going to be a huge gap between the white veterans and the black veterans. And then you add in segregation and redlining and, the fact that mortgages and home loans were blocked for certain black folks and not really for white folks. And the list goes on and on, right? So it's like, oh, okay, well, so the system was actually designed to keep these folks disenfranchised and poor, and to advantage white families. And so the system is not broken because the system is working the way that it has been intended to work. Okay, cool. Well, so hearing a white writer talk about that and really explain the different dimensions of her own privilege, even as someone who wasn't necessarily wealthy, it sounds like barely middle class, like was fascinating to me because I just had never seen that before. So I highly recommend that if that is your jam. And then I added Great Expectations by Vincent Cunningham to my list because there wasn't enough fiction represented. I guess my mind just didn't go there this year as it relates to Black fiction. But I really enjoyed reading Vincent's debut and about a candidate that's a lot like Obama and a campaign staffer that seems a lot like Vincent. So that was like really fun to just think about who the different characters were based on and to remember sort of the sentiments and feelings of that time when it felt like America was headed in a different direction, maybe in a permanent way, but as it turns out, we were not. We are not. And so that was my list for 2024. I will add that I did see 6888, and I've been excited to just remind folks that it's just a coincidence that Tyler Perry happened to also be telling the story of the 688 Postal Battalion at the same time that I was, and our stories are not in competition with each other. It's really fun to see Kerry Washington play Major Charity Adams, and to see some of the things that I researched for several years on the medium-sized screen. I did not see it in theaters. I saw it on Netflix. And I'm excited to see what else unfurls as a result of the 688. I've been excited to hear people learn their story and give them their flowers, because at the end of the day, the more people talk about these 855 Black women who served in World War II, who absolutely deserve all of the movies and all of the TV shows and all of the books. I think there's even a Broadway play coming out soon. I think there are some children's books in the works. Like, we need more of them. You know, there are millions and millions of stories about white male veterans in this country, and we can add several more, if not hundreds more, about the 688 to fill the gaps in history. So that's me on my soapbox here at the end of 2024. Thank you for listening. I am still reading books like The Black Utopians by Aaron Robertson, which is fascinating. I'm about halfway through. I'm also reading Night Flyer, Harriet Tubman and the Faith Dreams of a Free People. And I have dipped in a little bit to Nat Turner, Black Prophet, A Visionary History by Anthony Kay. So I recommend those two. I may not get back here to offer official reviews of them since they're sort of holdovers from this year. I am starting to dip into 2025 reads. I'm really looking forward to Imani Perry's book coming out in January, Black and Blues, which I'm planning to pre-order soon. There's some other stuff coming out in 2025 that I can't wait to talk to you about. But this has gone on long enough. Thank you so much for your support, for subscribing. Please share with a friend. Please let me know what your favorites of 2024 were. If you want to say, yes, I really love that. No, I didn't really like that. I can't believe you have this taste. If you have a different list, I want to know what's on your list, so that I can add it to my ever-growing to be read list. In the meantime, thank you for sharing your thoughts with me and your attention and your time. Wishing you happy reading, happy everything for 2025, and I will see you again here next year.